Welcome to the ERA Legislative Forum, everyone. Several of my colleagues are in the room. What I want to do is introduce, first of all, Julie Von Haefen, who is the new ERA co-chairperson, and that's Equal Rights co-chairperson. I always say ERA, but she is one of the people that took over Equal Rights. So Julie is working closely with all of us on equal rights issues.
I'll just say quickly, thank you so much everyone for being here. I want to give a shout out to Hudson, my LA, who really helped organize this whole room. So thank you, Hudson. And I'm very proud to be a part and one of the primary sponsors of the bill today. And I want to thank Representative Cunningham for allowing me and shepherding me and mentoring me through this. So I'm excited to get to know all of you over the next session and hopefully in future sessions and work with you. And hopefully this is finally the year to ratify the ERA here in North Carolina.
For those who I haven't met yet, my name's Joanna Wade. I am a North Carolina native. I'm from Asheville. I went to the University of North. Yes, that's right. I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I live in Charlotte now with my children, an 8-year-old daughter, 5-year-old son, my husband, and I'm a lawyer at Winston and Strawn, which is a big supporter of the Equal Rights Amendment. I am also, along with Marina Grohl, co-president of the ERA NC Alliance. I say that I'm Marina's sidekick, but it is my great pleasure and privilege to be able to welcome you to this forum on behalf of Marina, the Alliance, and our members. We're very excited to have you here today. We're very grateful for the great work that you do to move North Carolina forward. We know that there are a lot of important issues that demand your time and attention, and we're so grateful for your consideration and support of this one, which we think is critical. Our hope for the forum today is that this will be an educational experience. I can tell already that we've got staunch allies in the room, and so hopefully you'll learn something from our panelists that will make you even more of an effective advocate. And if you're newer to the issues or curious and want to learn more, hopefully you'll learn something here that will make you think about the Equal Rights Amendment in a new light. So I'm joined on the panel by 3 very distinguished panelists who we're so grateful to have here in this state. They are national leaders, some for decades, in the fight for equal rights. I could spend our entire hour telling you about their backgrounds, which are fascinating and very impressive. But in the interest of time, I will give you some of the highlights and introducing them, and then we've got more fulsome biographies printed for your reference. So on my left here is Eleanor Smeal, who you may know. Yes, that's right. Probably no introduction, but I'll do it anyway. She's president of the Feminist Majority Foundation and a former longtime president of the National Organization for Women. Woo! Ellie is recognized rightfully throughout the nation as a women's rights leader. She appears frequently on television and radio, testifies before Congress on a wide variety of women's issues, and for over 2 decades has played a leading role in both national and state campaigns to win women's rights legislation in a number of landmark state and federal court cases for women's rights. She's also a graduate of Duke University, so it's especially nice to welcome her back to the state. On my right is Carol Jenkins. Carol is co-president and CEO of the National ERA Coalition and the Fund for Women's Equality. These are sister organizations that are dedicated to the passage and enactment of the Equal Rights Amendment. She's been a board member since 2015 and an active participant in all of the coalition's initiatives. And she joined the leadership team in December, becoming co-president along with founder Jessica Newworth. Carol is an award-winning author, filmmaker, former television journalist, fabulous speaker, all-around great person, and we're delighted to have her here. To Carol's right is Bettina Hager. She is the DC Director and Chief Operating Officer of the ERA Coalition and Fund for Women's Equality, working side by side with Carol. Bettina previously served as the co-chair of the Equal Rights Amendment Task Force of the National Council of Women's Organizations, and she's been helping lead the movement for constitutional equality since 2012. So give them a big warm round of applause. So we're here because North Carolina has the historic opportunity not just to improve the lives of North Carolina women and families here, but for women and families across the country by becoming the 38th and final state necessary to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. It is within our grasp. We're very excited about making this happen, and we want to work here in North Carolina to help push us over the finish line. I thought I'd start just by showing the text of the Equal Rights Amendment. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it, but just to table set for the group, the Equal Rights Amendment is really a short and straightforward thing and supplies something in our Constitution that's lacking today. It provides that equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. So it enshrines in the Constitution this principle of constitutional equality. It also provides authorizing language that enables Congress the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. Now I know that I don't need to give legislators in this room a civics lesson, but that's important because it empowers Congress to do things to further the Equal Rights Amendment. And then it also has a 2-year runway provision that gives time to implement the ERA after the date that it's ratified, when it's ratified. So the ERA was written in the 1920s by a woman named Alice Paul, and it was introduced every year in Congress until the 1970s when it passed and went to the states for ratification. But by the time Congress's internal deadline expired in 1982, only 35 of the necessary 38 states had ratified it. Those states are shaded in blue on my map. Eleanor, you served as the president of NOW, the National Organization of Women, during much of that period, and you were on the front lines of the original push to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Why was the ERA so important to you then, and why is it still so relevant today?
Well, the National Organization for Women, and can you all hear me? I don't talk as loud as. That's a good thing. Was engaged in many, many lawsuits, especially in the 70s. And one of the things that we learned is that our laws are not strong enough for equal rights for women. We sued, you name the thing, we sued at some time. But we were suing, just to give you a feel, police departments, banks, insurance companies, television stations, not stations, heck, we couldn't start there, networks. I mean, one time we were sitting in Illinois working on the ERA, and we're saying, why do they hate us so much? And then we started counting all the things we were suing at that time, which was their police department, Harris Bank, I could go on. But the reality is that our laws aren't strong enough, and you don't realize that until you start taking real cases to help real people. There's too many loopholes, etc. So we felt a little bit like Pied Pipers because we were encouraging suits if the person couldn't get any other traction, and then we saw all the tactics to deny people justice. And so it's a short thing. We became very active in the ERA from almost the start of the National Organization for Women. I think it was 67 that we came out with the ERA, 67, and hung in there all these years. In fact, I believe it was because that now it was new then that we busted it finally out of Congress. There was a lot of groups working on it, thank goodness. AUW, BPW, I could say them all, and they were valuable. In fact, it's out of the business and professional, and I'm not quite sure if we would have, because Martha Griffiths was the member of Congress. I'm going too much into history. I don't think I have that much time, but basically, what they did is we disrupted the 18-year-old. They were going to put the 18-year-old vote in the Constitution, and we wanted the women in. We've been fighting since 1923 when Alice Paul put that in. So a group of people, all now activists plus the now President William Scott Heide, disrupted the Birch Bayh hearings on the 18th Amendment. They were going to be thrown out by Sergeant at Arms and the police and et cetera, and Bayh couldn't stand all these middle-aged women being thrown out, so he said, wait, don't, I promise I'll meet with you if you just sit down right now. So he did, that started the hearings, and anyway, I could go into the whole struggle to get it through. Unfortunately, there was this time limit put in to get it through. It was a compromise, a time limit in the preamble, and I want to say that because that's what makes us able to finish this job. It was in the preamble saying at that time the original expiration date was not 1982. It was 3 years and 3 months before that, and it was in the preamble, and it was a trick, in our opinion, to put a timeline in the first place and to make it 7 years, because basically it gave people a feeling that we had plenty of time to do it, and it allowed the opposition, which was primarily the business interest, to organize. Anyway, that timeline becomes very important because we realized we could not get it through. And so in 1978, I had the privilege of leading the campaign to extend the deadline. We only got 3 years and 3 months for a reason. Our opponents did not want us to get a state senate race going. And in most state legislatures are 4-year terms, and basically they did it so that we could not be active in the 82 general elections. Remember, the deadline became June 30th, 1982. This has been, so anyway, we know once Congress can extend it, it can extend it again. And so we at the same time are now moving to remove the deadline again. We just got 2 states, as you well know. We're going to go for the 3rd state, and we have a wonderful legal team working on it, some of the best lawyers in the country. We know that if we pass this thing, we have a chance, and we're going all the way this time. So that's a little bit of history. But by the way, that movie in MSNBC did not talk about removing the timeline, nor the extension. They acted like you could not, and you can. And I just want to make sure everybody knows that. And that we are moving now in several states, not just North Carolina. And on February 21st, we got, this is the closest vote you can get. To get it on the floor, if for 47 years they've held the vote up by keeping it in the Privileges and Election Committee of the House. If we can get it on the floor, we pass this thing. But in the vote that we did a rare procedural motion by a young person who had just been elected, a former president of a now chapter, to bust it out of there. That motion on February 22nd fell 50 to 50. One vote. One vote is what we're gonna do it. But I just say, and why is that necessary? Because the GOP decided to block it and block it and block it in the Privilege and Elections Committee. And that's where we are, but we're gonna bust it out. And we're gonna do it here too.
Woo! Carol, Ellie touched on it a little bit, but the ERA Coalition really is helping to lead the charge in this renewed push to ratify the ERA. So for those of us who may be newer to the issue and have heard about recent ratifications, can you catch us up a little bit on what's happened in the last couple of years to reinvigorate this issue nationally and here in North Carolina too?
Sure. I'm so thrilled to be here, especially with Eleanor Smeal, who is our leader, who's been working on this and has many of the lessons to share with us, I can assure you. First of all, the ERA Coalition is comprised of about 100 organizations, including what's in Strong, the Feminist Majority, Marina Grohl and the ERA NC Alliance, Judy Lotus, who is here. In fact, Carla Cunningham was in New York City with us last year when the coalition held a gathering of women of color who were instrumental in the passage of the ERA. So if you're telling the story of what's happened recently, it really is a story of women of color, because State Senator Pat Spearman in Nevada.
Woo!
Right. That's exactly the way I feel about it. And if you've ever heard her speak, you'll know,
She
you know, almost single-handedly got Nevada to pass, to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. And those of us who have been working in this for many years, my goodness, the coalition is 5 years old, and you know, we've all been working in it as individuals for a lifetime. We all looked at each other and we said, does that really count? And then somebody said, yes, it does. And so we were invigorated to move along. You'll know that there had been a lapse of enthusiasm for a while where people thought there was no way forward, but that was before Pat Spearman got Nevada to ratify. Illinois was the next state, and in that state it was Juliana Stratton, who's now the lieutenant governor there, who made an impassioned speech. That was a very close call in Illinois. Made an impassioned speech on the floor that actually carried that bill. It's another woman of color. And now in Virginia, where we just left, Bettina and I had our standard hotel room.
We miss it.
Rooms, right, you know, we were there 7 times, you know, from August until just most recently when it failed, when it was made to fail by that close passage. I always say, you know, Virginia did not defeat the ERA. It was 2 men who in charge of committees in Virginia who defeated the ERA in Virginia, and therefore kept equality from 166 million women. So we know that North Carolina is not going to let that happen here. I know that you've got some obstacles yourselves, but it's just that close, you know. I mean, that's when I talk to my grandchildren, I take them lobbying with me. The 7-year-old, when she was 7, she's now 9, you know, would go to Capitol Hill and she'd knock on the doors of the offices and say, we're here, you know, for equal rights. It is so close, and what we have to understand is that it is crucial. We were in a meeting earlier today where a simple thing like equal pay in North Carolina, if women in North Carolina had equal pay to the men in North Carolina, it would add $15.3 billion to your GDP. And it is something as simple as that the Equal Rights Amendment can make possible.
Say that number again, please.
$15.3 billion.
And also reduce poverty of women by 50%.
Well, and Bettina will add her comments in just a second. See, she's used to add so-and-so. But I think that right here in Virginia, if you know that you could add 3% to your GDP by just paying women what men make, that is worth the fight. We're thrilled to be here. Joanne?
So one of the ways that the National ERA Coalition is helping to lead the charge is really through a lot of public education and messaging. What have you learned from your polling research about the level of public support for the Equal Rights Amendment?
Well, we've learned that the support is very, very high. Our polling shows that 94% of respondents would support an amendment to the U.S. Constitution to guarantee equal rights for women and men. But it also showed that 80% of respondents thought that already existed. And one of the things I always say is, you know, I think that there's this feedback, and coming from the millennial generation, it especially hits at young women. People don't care about this. People don't know about this. So it's very hard to ask someone to care about something they don't know about, and even harder to ask them to work on it. And when I speak to my peers, they hear about that. Well, first of all, half of them tell me I'm wrong. I don't know what I'm talking about, and I guess I basically waste every day of my life working on this because we already have it. And then they find out that that's not true, and then they get very angry because, you know, there's this feeling I think deep inside of them that they've been told their entire life that they should have equal rights, and when they don't, they feel like something inside of them was ripped away. You know, something you felt you had, you no longer have. So the polling shows that we have a very high level of support, but what it shows is that we need to continue our public education efforts using the statistics like the 15.3 million, 3% GDP increase, that if women were paid equally, half of the women in poverty would be taken out of poverty, which also affects children. So we have to say, when we say women, we have to think about the families and all the young women and the single mothers, especially who are heads of households, who that money would change the lives of future generations as well as current generations. And I also want to thank everyone for having us, and call out Marina and Robbie and Judy and Joanna and Representative Cunningham and everyone in this room who's supporting, and Ellie, my friend and colleague, and especially Carol, who is leading this movement. So thank you for having me.
Well, the information gap that you described is something we're among friends here, so I'll confess, you know, as a person who's a lawyer and who works at a law firm that was actively involved in trying to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, I said to my partner, but what is it, and what does it give us that we don't already have? And I didn't know, and I was a would-be ally who didn't know, and you don't have to take my word for it or Bettina's word for it. Justices from, you know, different ideologies on the Supreme Court agree. Justice Antonin Scalia famously commented that certainly the Constitution does not require discrimination on the basis of sex, and I'll assume that was a little tongue-in-cheek. The only issue is whether it prohibits it. It doesn't. On the other end of the spectrum, Justice Ginsburg agrees with him. Every constitution written since the end of World War II includes a provision that men and women are citizens of equal stature. Ours does not. It's not in there. And that's true. There's nothing in the Constitution today that prohibits sex-based discrimination or guarantees the equal stature of men and women under the Constitution. So the ERA is different, and it's different from other legal protections that we've secured. It's different from the Equal Protection Clause, which people often think of as providing some protection against gender-based discrimination, right? Because this would be a constitutional amendment that actually enshrines this principle of constitutional equality in that document, in the core of our nation, our Constitution, this guiding principle. Ellie, can you talk a little bit about, I know throughout your distinguished career, you've worked hard on different legislative achievements. The Pregnancy Discrimination Act is one, I think, when you were at now. But to you, what's different between a constitutional amendment and the sort of piecemeal accomplishment through legislation?
The big difference is that it's the highest law of our land. It covers all 50 states. But not only that, the guarantees that tell people, oh yeah, you have equal rights, are just statutes that can be changed by hostile government just like that. And we said that at the time, over and over again, but no one believed us. ERA goes down 1982, Supreme Court strikes down, for all intents and purposes, Title IX, which guarantees equal educational access. But the catch is, if it's a federally funded program, okay, forget that. But anyway, they essentially got it. 1984. It took us 4 years to put it back on the books. We keep fighting to keep it. I've spent 40 years of my life at least, and you said 2 decades. I wish it was just 2 decades. Anyway, fighting to keep the equal Title IX. We just won a lawsuit, Feminist Majority Foundation, in December, which for the first time says that it was not only Title IX that was violated by the University of Mary Washington, and I can go into that case, but that the Equal Protection Clause also was violated. The Equal Protection Clause does not always cover sex discrimination. Let it be clear. And one of the things that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has said, and very clearly, the most important thing we could do to prove the Constitution is to pass the Equal Rights Amendment, because the 14th Amendment does not always work for us. And I can go into that history. Not only that, at the present time, we are not a suspect class, women, gender. And that means that if the government, a state government, a local government, or the federal government has some reason to treat women or men differently, that is treated as a medium level. It doesn't automatically lock that out. So what does this mean in real life? We're losing lawsuits that we should have. And one of the biggest exceptions, and I believe one of the opponents of this amendment, is in insurance coverage. It was not till 2010 that gender benefits and gender pricing was eliminated through the Affordable Care Act. What does that mean to the average woman's pocketbook? It means that we were paying 150 to 200% more for the same damn policy, and those policies 80% of the time did not cover pregnancy, for goodness sakes.
Yes.
I mean, we are excluded many times. Penile implants it covers, doesn't cover breast implants, after you've had a mastectomy or whatever. I mean, reality is that there is all kinds of discrimination in insurance. Now we got a law, but for 69 times now the GOP is trying to repeal that law. God knows if they'll be. It's just a law. It doesn't mean that you have a guarantee. That's just one form of insurance discrimination. We're discriminated against in life insurance, in annuities, in pensions, and in there's another major category of insurance. So basically, the reason that the GOP tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act 69 times is because these major insurance companies wanted it repealed, health insurance companies. So that's just one thing. On equal pay, give me a break. The laws are weak guaranteeing equal pay. And I could go statute by statute. And so I'm not a lawyer, but I have been in the hardcore and in the trenches, and I can tell you it is a total disgrace that what we're doing to the average woman worker. And when they say, and the opponents will say it, and they say it all the time, that we're misleading people, this only covers public employment, that is not true. And that is not true because of what we just said about how laws are interpreted. And remember, even Title VII, which gives us equal employment, only does it's the only law we have at the federal level. It only covers companies over 15 people. Small companies are very plentiful in our country. It has to be engaged in interstate commerce. And so there's exception upon exception. So don't let them tell you those things. And I think that if all our people understood this, they not only would be for it, they'd be damn mad they're being cheated.
It's hardly ever necessary to add anything when Ellie tells us about it, but the way I like to interpret Ellie's words is that right now it is not nice to discriminate against women. What the ERA will do is make it illegal, and that's the strength that we need. So,
We've been talking about the issue of pay equity and some of the practical implications and real life experiences of women here in North Carolina and across the country. And I wanted to share, I think, some of the data that Bettina was talking about, and this comes from the Institute for Women's Policy Research and, of course, our North Carolina Council for Women and Youth Involvement, and some of the great work that the administration is doing exploring the status of women in North Carolina. And perhaps this is what younger generations of women have in mind. We have made progress, certainly we have, but despite that progress, North Carolina women face substantial disparities, and these are just a few of the really compelling statistics from this report that I encourage you to take a look at. Women have higher levels of education, but earn far less than men. In North Carolina, the gender wage gap is 19.1% on average, but with much larger disparities for some women of color. Hispanic women earn just 49 cents on the dollar as compared to white men, and Black and American Indian women earn 62 cents on the dollar. At the current rates of progress, if we'll call it that, the gender wage gap will not close until 2060. That's unacceptable. If working women in North Carolina were paid the same as comparable men, we would reduce the poverty rate among working women by more than half, and we would infuse that increase to our GDP that Carol and Bettina were talking about. Nearly 75% of North Carolina mothers are in our workforce. I'm one of them. I suspect many of you are too, but many of those women lack basic work supports. And this has huge impacts on North Carolina families because families headed by single women are among our most economically vulnerable. What are some of the practical implications that you think might be possible for pay equity through the Equal Rights Amendment?
Well, listen, I started being aware of this discrepancy between men and women early in my career as a reporter. And the way we justify the difference and the work that was being done, does anybody remember the pipeline? It's that, don't worry, there's a pipeline. Women are moving through it. They're moving up, they're going to the corner offices, and by X year, there will be equality. Well, guess what? It's a myth. There is no pipeline. Well, there is a pipeline, but so many women are stuck in it that we will not see progress in this incremental way. I mean, for women with graduate degrees, this lifetime discrepancy is probably about $2 million that will not be in their bank accounts, even for a high school graduate. It's an enormous amount of money, and it is the major indicator of poverty for families. And I think that the approach here in North Carolina to look at it based on families is the appropriate way to understand. Because when you say woman, you're not talking about one person. You are talking about a family unit of 3 or 4 or 5 or more people who are all stuck in poverty and will not be able to get out of it in their lifetimes. Do you want to?
Yeah, and I have to say, it was, I think, last week that I started just fantasizing for some reason, like, okay, so what if the ERA were passed? What are the laws that we could do? And I'm not saying this is going to happen, this is just in my fantasy. And I was like, well, what about paid maternity leave? Could we say maybe that would be something we should fight with? I'm not saying it would work or not. What about paid, family leave, at least on the federal level? And Ellie touched on the point that some people say, oh no, it wouldn't affect the private sector, but there was a panel of private sector kind of managers who were recently discussing this, and they said, okay, even if it doesn't directly affect the private sector, if the public sector all of a sudden has to provide all these benefits for women that aren't available in the private sector, they're going to take away our best employees.
That's right.
And then the private sector is going to say, wait, no, we want them here, and have to up their standards. So it does also, contractors they're federal contractors, and they could set those standards as well. But I mean, I think in the entire community, that would set a standard that everyone would have to live up to in order to get the best employees. And we are one of 3 countries that has no paid maternity leave. These are just my dreams of things that we should be thinking about or should be trying to do when we have an ERA. And I think that hopefully we can all be able to dream and actually implement some of these ideas in the future.
I was talking to a reporter recently, and she said, what do you say to young women who may be optimistic about their futures? What do you say to them? And what I prefaced it by saying is that I hate breaking their hearts, because I know they firmly believe that their generation will be different. But I have to tell them, that they are faced, this country has never experienced equality. No one in this country has lived in a time where the United States of America operated on the basis of equality. Somebody has always been left out. And even after we put women in the Constitution, we then have to look at all the other people who are left out. And at the coalition, we work on constitutional equality. So next in line after the ERA, what about, people of color, people of different faiths, people with disability, people of different gender expressions, no one was thought of when this Constitution, was put together. So then after we get this, which says you cannot discriminate based on sex, then we have to go back and say, what else do we have to add to that to make sure that we're a country where every person who arrives here, lives here, works here, goes to school, is considered an equal human being, or even human for that matter, and deserving of equality, of what we call an equal future. We are working for an equal future for every person born in the United States of America, and that begins by passing the ERA.
That's right.
The gender wage gap, as you know, is a gender race wage gap, but let's put it a different thing. Wages are only one measure of income, and we really should change that from a wage gap to an income gap. If you did that, women who are not making 70-some cents on the dollar, it is really closer to 60 cents. And what, I'm talking the average for all women, then you would put black women, Latino women, and other categories, which would be even lower. And that's why so many people do not have a living wage. What's in the income gap that would really change things is that obviously it's wages, what you're getting per hour, but it's also would include, do you have health insurance coverage with your job? Most men in a higher place, that's just taken for granted. Women frequently are in those jobs, as are people of color, no income, no automatic insurance coverage. Some of the other people have life insurance coverage as a part of their job. Not most women, obviously, in all these other categories. How about disability insurance? Now, some states require it, but not all states. But that would be a part of the income package. What about bonuses? Bonuses are the way that the wealthy, especially wealthy men, get those high million things. How do we get billionaires? They're not working for wages. That's like for the lower income. How about commissions? You get the picture. And we actually have been fighting for an income measure. And we got it in the last year of Obama's term, and as an executive order, because we can't get it through Congress. And guess what? One of the first things Trump did was to reverse that income measure. We don't want people to know how much they're being cheated. So I really think that we used to wear a 59-cent button for the campaign, saying when we're making 59 cents. Well, bring them out. And bring out 40 cents. We're being ripped off, and people understood. But again, that MSNBC documentary made this issue. We were defeated, they said, because of abortion and gay rights. We were not. That was not what was lobbying against us. It was the Chambers of Commerce, it was the National Manufacturer Association, it was various insurance companies, it was big business. It's money, 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 and do not get off of that because people understand it.
So we're in a race now to be the 38th state. And hopefully we're going to do it. Hopefully we will be, North Carolina will be 38. If another state beats us to it, can we put our feet up? No. And why not? Why is it important for us to keep pushing just as hard as ever to be the 39th state if we don't get there to 38 first?
Well, we see the enthusiasm on the ground. We get calls from various states who are working it, want to get engaged. And the day that we got a call from Georgia was the day we all looked at each other and said, what? Georgia? But I want to tell you that the people in Georgia are extremely serious, and Missouri and even Utah. We're going to, Arizona. I mean, they're doing a 38-mile walk, for the 38th state. Some of the states have already made their, merchandise. I don't know whether you've done it here yet, Marina, do you have cups and shirts and all the
Oh, as the 38th state?
38, yes.
I mean, we're already wearing white before Easter. I don't know about making
Yeah,
our.
but-
We'll wait to make our commemorative cups.
Yeah, I want you to know that we're already making, there's a huge industry going on with the number 38 already. So-
I hope the proceeds will go to some of the state or national coalitions.
Right, right. So I think that we'll have 40, 42. I think that the enthusiasm will grow. As you know, we have a legal task force that has looked at all of the things that will have to take place or may take place after we get the 38th state. And you may want to talk a little bit about that in terms of the options. So somebody said to me recently, oh, this is terrific. You'll get the 38th state and you guys can now relax. You know? And I said, are you kidding me? You know, that is when the party begins, because first there's the 2-year waiting period in which everybody has to get organized to understand and accept equality, you know. And then there are all of the challenges that will come, you know, from that. It's removal. We're working on removal of the deadline. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Bettina's on the line with their offices of the representatives and the senators every single day. You know,
Yes.
How are we doing?
Yes, we'll be, and so Jackie Spear has introduced House Resolution 38, again for that 38th state. Apparently she was super pumped when she found out she got it. Yeah, and that was purposeful. She was really aiming for, I don't know if she had to sit there and wait to be the 38th person. But apparently, so she was HJRES 38. In the Senate, it's a bipartisan joint introduction by Senator Cardin from Maryland and Senator Murkowski from Alaska. And what this would do would kind of, it's like we have backup against this argument about there being a deadline, which A, was in the preamble, and B, was put on by Congress. So we're saying, okay, fine, if that's an argument you want to make, well, we're going to get Congress to remove it. If your argument is they put it on, okay, now they removed it. It was in the preamble. And then there are some people who say, you know, does Congress really have a right to tell a state how many years they can ratify and then whether or not their ratification is valid? So why not remove it and then, you know, they say we have it. And then I think the other argument is going to be, you know, maybe there were some states that didn't want to do it, which is why it's so important that we should get 50 states to ratify.
That's right.
So that we can say, what are you talking about? Even if there were some states who way back when said that they no longer wanted to do it, which has never been recognized. Well, we have an overwhelming number of states that completely cancels that out. So, you know, continuing with North Carolina, with Georgia, with South Carolina, Virginia, Arizona, Missouri, and all the states that have active campaigns can only help the cause. So, yeah.
And Virginia, by the way, still considers itself in the game. So
Good.
yeah, they have an election November 5th, and expect to reorganize their electoral process in Virginia, and they could have it in January. So I would recommend that, you know, North Carolina, you know, do it now.
That's right, and we'll keep our foot on the gas. So I think we're nearing the end of our time, but I promised I would, and I want to make sure we open it up so you have an opportunity to ask questions if anybody wants to ask any questions of our panelists.
Two-part question. How are our chances in North Carolina, and what as legislators can we do to increase those chances, other than co-sponsoring the bill?
How are your chances, Joanna?
Maybe Representative.
Yes, yeah.
Have you, well,
It's-
yeah, one part, so.
It's really how we can work with the chairs of the Rules Committee. Like, I'm gonna have to go to David and ask them to pull it out, because I know it's going to Rules before it go anyplace else. And to ask them to have it heard in committee. I don't know which committee they would send it to, but
Pressure
they,
committee chairs.
yeah, but then I would have to do that. But talk to the other people across the aisle.
Yeah.
Because it's not us that
Right.
don't want it done, it's engaging them to get them to understand. And their philosophy or their ideology is not gonna change, but you still need to have the conversation so that maybe they will learn something that they never knew or, you know, haven't embraced. So that's the work. The work is in this building. And Senator McKissick, I don't know, Erica Smith is here. So we've got to talk to them, and you know, I've talked to Representative Warren, I've talked to Representative McGrady. I went in Representative Warren's office and I sat down and I talked to him. I asked him, "Would you primary responsible?" And he said, "I'll read it and I'll look over it." And he did. And then when I went back to his office, he said, "Carl, I can't do it." I said, "Okay, thank you."
I
You
think
know,
you gotta keep,
you still-
you have to keep the pressure up.
You
Now, we
still got to
came-
keep the conversation
Yes,
going.
because we came last year with this, and
Yep.
we made a large impact. We didn't stop. We've been working on this all year in a group. You met earlier down here, Marina, you met down here earlier with the group. And we talked, we had a press conference then, out in the hall. So we gotta keep it up. You can't just do one thing. And the more they hear, the more advanced they are and faithful they are. So they gotta go back home too. They go back home to wives, to mothers, to daughters, to people that depend upon this. And when they go back home and they know what we have done, that we have been very vocal and that we have stood up, it makes a difference. I think that's what we gotta do. See, we didn't stop since last year. We've been steady moving. And Maureen and her group's been down here and working, and continue to do so.
Thank you, and thank you for your support and for all of the legislators that are behind this. And we are making inroads. We are now having people on both sides of the aisle coming in and starting to ask questions, and some have pledged in their, or should I say they have responded to the survey with, yes, they are interested in co-sponsoring. So we do have movement on that side. Don't forget that they are learning as well as we are learning, and so we're starting to see that crossover from on a more bipartisan level.
And I would say continue to, on the county level, because all politics starts on the local level, get your county commissioners to pass resolutions, get women's groups, women's auxiliaries, women's organizations on the county level to start supporting this. So you as legislators can do grassroots advocacy to help these women's groups with sharing this information that's been shared with us. And so serving as advocates, spreading the information about the alliance, that's been really helpful, passing it on the local level. And they pass the resolution, send it to the legislators, and that gives them more indication that there is support for this.
It is wonderful. The cities and the counties now are beginning to pass ERA resolutions. And when you get down to that grassroots backyard conversation with your city councils and your commissioners, you are having dialogue. So it's wonderful to see them coming on board.
That's exactly right. And the Alliance and its member organizations, you know, we're all over the state. And we have people in every, nook and cranny, and would be happy to work with organizations that you identify. If you think it'd be helpful to send a speaker, we're happy to do that. Terry and I did that in Charlotte a couple of weeks ago. You know, we're going all over the place. So we want to help support you in that effort and be a resource to you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us because we're happy to do that.
Are we ready to wrap up?
I think we can.
Okay, the House bill number is 271.
271. Vote 271.
And Senate bill number is 148, hold on, wait for me.
184.
Thank you, 184, that's correct. Yes. Awesome. Yeah. Yes, S 184 and H 271.
Yeah.
So come on down to the press conference at 1:30 and show your support, and that'll be starting in 20 minutes.
Thank you.
It'll be ERA photos for final.